Hello, my name is Reverend Heng Sure. I'm an American and a Buddhist monk, have been for the last 30 years. I was born in Columbus, Ohio, was educated in the Midwest, studied Chinese language, found myself in Taiwan in 1969 studying Chinese for the summer program, and then went on my way to Japan to discover whether Zen Buddhism still existed. And I was introduced to Japan by Japanese Buddhism by Gary Snyder, the poet and interpreter of the East for the West. And sure enough, I found a Zen monastery in Kyoto to live in, which I practiced there for several months, and came back to finish my education, still studying Chinese. And then in 1972, came to California, to University of California, Berkeley, to finish my master's degree in Asian languages and also Buddhism. And at that point, something changed in my life. I met a genuine teacher. I met a Buddhist monk from Manchuria whose name is Master Hsuan Hua. And that's kind of where my story begins. So I'd like to talk tonight on my experiences as a Buddhist monk from America, meeting the Buddhist tradition from China, and the changes in my points of view, my perspectives, over the years of encounter with Chinese language, with Chinese culture, and also with the Chinese tradition of Buddhism. The basic topic of my talk is, what is true freedom? And I have to say, I'm interpreting that differently now than I did 30 years ago. Growing up in the West, where freedom is not just a value, but it's an absolute pillar of our culture. The American way of interpreting freedom as I grew up was, don't fence me in. That is to say, in this country we celebrate our outlaws, people who bend the rules, people who break the rules are the ones that we write about and make movies about. And growing up in that culture with that influence, I certainly felt that way. My point of view was, give me a rule and I'll find a way to break it. That was just kind of what I absorbed. And yet, the deeper significance of freedom and whether or not, what really hemmed me in, I didn't have a clue. I was just a normal guy growing up. But when I encountered the teachings of the Buddha, particularly in the Chinese canon, in the Chinese Buddhist scriptures that I encountered in the library at UC Berkeley, I realized that I didn't actually have a clue about true freedom and also what was tying me up in a fundamental way. It was when I heard the story of the Buddha that I first recognized some of the limits to freedom that were actually impinging on me, that were hemming me in, that were keeping me locked up, that I didn't understand. Now I'm going to fast forward. As a monk, I do a lot of teaching. I live now and teach in Berkeley, California, and up and down the California coast, from Mendocino County to San Jose and Los Angeles and on. And because I'm on the road a lot and I teach a lot, I'm now defining myself as a storyteller. And the stories that I tell are sacred stories. That is to say, not just the Three Bears and Goldilocks, but stories that actually benefit the human condition. And I want to tell a story right now about something that happened to me just this year. In fact, it was just 2 months ago in Paulien, Taiwan. This is on a little town in the east coast of Taiwan. We visit Taiwan as a delegation from the Dharma Realm Buddhist Association. We're based at the City of 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah, California. This time we went to Taiwan. We had a large delegation of 61 people who had gone to Taiwan to do Buddhist practices. And we took 25 of that group of 61 and flew from Taipei in the north to Hualien on the east coast to visit prisons. We have a prison ministry in Taiwan, which is quite wonderful, and this is the third visit that I've gone to the prisons in Taiwan. And What in the world would an American Buddhist monk speaking English and growing up in the Midwest have to say to someone behind bars on the east coast of Taiwan? Well, I didn't know the answer to that question. But when I got there, I realized that we shared something very fundamental, which was limits to freedom. Visible, in the case of the prisoners, the bars are very visible. When our talk was done, I was able to go out through the 6 iron gates that are locked and unlocked with little keys owned by one person who has it tied to his waist. The doors only have locks on the one side and not on the other side. And so I went through those 6 gates and got in the bus and drove away. And they don't say prisoners, they say classmates. The classmates inside the prison were not free. So in that case, the limits to freedom were really clear. It's iron bars and courtyards, 6 courtyards progressively to get outdoors, plus all the armed guards and the broken glass and the barbed wire and the electricity that keeps them inside. So that was clear. But what we shared that was in common were the invisible bars that keep me and the classmates inside from understanding genuine freedom. I'm talking, of course, about old age, sickness, and death. Old age, sickness, and death are, you could say, invisible prison bars that keep me from doing what I want. When it's time to get sick, I lay down and get sick. When it's time to get old, as I'm aging now, I can't prevent it. Wrinkle creams don't work, vitality tonics make you feel good for a while, but too much of anything will make you sick. You get older, you get old, your body ages. When it's time to die, you can't vote. It's time to go. Death is not democratic in the sense that you don't get to determine when. It's democratic that everyone goes. So in that sense, going behind the bars to visit the classmates inside, I completely embodied the reality of my invisible prison that I lived in. The cage of my body determines how free I am. When it dies, I go. Now, the question when you come to study Buddhism is a fundamental question. This is the question that Prince Siddhartha, the founder of the Buddhist religion, actually answered for himself, was, how free am I? What are the limits to my freedom? I'll get back to that in a minute. I want to go on with my story. So we went into the 4 different prisons this time. And the first was a detention center. And the detention center in Taiwan is not just a temporary holding pen. It's much more than that. Detention center is where people who commit offenses, it's apparently largely for drugs, very much like the situation the world over, I suspect, certainly in the West. The majority of the people in the detention center are there because of drug-related offenses. But also murderers are there, rapists are there, traffic offenders, white-collar crime, they're all there in the detention center waiting for their final sentence to be determined. Sometimes things get caught up in the courts and people can stay in the detention center for 20, 30 years, it turns out, regardless of your offense. So you can understand it's a very tense place. It is not a place of peace and rest and harmony. It's a place of worry. It's a place of trouble in mind. It's a place of blues, depression, suicide, and lots of trouble, lots of suffering, lots of pain. So there I was in the detention center, and we, along with the 25 members of our smaller delegation who went there, we went through the same series of gates and courtyards with tiny locks and little keys that open from one side, and the thumbprints that you have to, and the cameras for security, and the armed guards, of course, and came around through the 5th courtyard and heard the prisoners, the classmates, all inside reciting the name of a Buddhist bodhisattva, Earth Store Bodhisattva. And they sounded very much like military. They're going, Namo Di Zang Wang Pusa. I returned to Earth Store Bodhisattva, the king of great vows. And they went on chanting this way, and it was a big, loud, macho sound, but heartfelt. From the depths of their heart, these men, and this was all men in this case, were singing the name of the Bodhisattva who lives in the hells. The Buddhist Sutras talk about an awakened being who lives in the hells and tries hard to bring beings out of their suffering there. That's a very nasty neighborhood where Restored Bodhisattva lives. And these men were chanting the name of Restored Bodhisattva with the spirit of someone who doesn't want to go there. They want to meet Restored Bodhisattva while they're still in human bodies. So it was very moving to hear them chanting. So we came around the corner into the room where these men were chanting. And there was about 60 classmates. And I would want to say that this was a really tough-looking crew, full of tattoos and scars and mean looks and all. That's just not who was there. These are people who looked very much like my family. They didn't look like me because I'm wearing a robe and I have a shaved head. But these are people who had made bad choices, who had, for one reason or another, got caught for things that other people don't get caught for, maybe the same behavior. Some of them were hard, tough characters. Most of them were men who were suffering. And they were there because of their suffering, not necessarily because of their crimes. Maybe the antisocial behavior came from the suffering, but it was obvious that we shared more than we were different. We were more alike than we were different. You couldn't see the difference between the men on this side and the Buddhists, the monks and nuns, and the lay people on this side. So that was a real awakening, and it's been that way every time I've gone to the prison. There are a few folks who obviously are out of sync with society. Most are not. So I'm standing there and thinking, well, what am I going to say? And the first thing that came to mind was sing a song. Now, I had brought my guitar along. I play guitar as a monk. That's one of the tools that I'm using now in the West to teach Dharma. Because Western religion is full of music. You just think of let's say, the Messiah, Handel's Messiah, is completely religious inspired. Much of Bach's finest pieces, many of Bach's finest pieces are inspired by music, and Mozart, and on and on and on. They all had God in front of them as they wrote their tunes of praise and their masses and their sonatas and concertos. So America is likewise full of religious music. Buddhism is now coming to the West, and it's important that we not miss that opportunity to teach the Dharma through music. So I had my guitar with me, and I thought, the issue here, I understand that I'm going to leave this room when my talk is over, but you're all going to stay. Now, can I say something that eases that pain, eases that pressure? So I pulled out my guitar, and I sang a song called Satisfied Mind. And I sang it in English. And it's a country and Western song, interestingly enough. But it really has a Buddhist flavor. It's got principle in it that is universal, international principles. And because I had sung this song once before in the same situation, someone had translated it into Chinese. So I had it there, I sang it in Chinese. And there were lots of tears, lots of recognition of something moving inside. So I connected with the song. And the song goes, how many times have you heard someone say, if I had his money, her money, I'd do things my way. But little they know that it's so hard to find one rich man, woman, in 10 with a satisfied mind. And the song is all about, in the end, what matters most is a satisfied mind. Not how much money you have, not what you can buy, not the people you love, your trophy wife or your handsome husband. Those all come and go. And as they go, they take a lot of suffering. They take pieces of your heart along with them. But if you can have a satisfied mind in the midst of poverty, in the midst of solitariness, you have got the secret. You found what life is about. And as I sang that song, although it's an American country and Western song, it became a country and Eastern song. That is to say, it completely connected with the men there in the detention center. So from that point on, the conversation went really well. We talked about what matters, what counts, and what is freedom. And I was able to say to them that if you can find peace of mind, if you can find a way to transform your suffering in your heart, then no matter where your body is, your mind has flown out over the wall. Your mind is free to travel. And in fact, being behind bars can be a wonderful opportunity to practice. Nothing's going to bother you there. So that made sense to some of the folks who were able to listen. So that was one prison we went to. We went on to what's called a light offense, a minimum security prison, where people go out to work during the day but come back at night. And they also can be with their families part of each month. And there was a connection there because they had an actual Buddhist monastery set up in the prison, where the prisoner can go and meditate every day, bow to the Buddha, do their chanting. So Buddhism has already become a part of the penal reform system, of the rehabilitation. So Buddhist principles are at work in Taiwan, in the jails. But the third place we went was very interesting. It was called the Paulien Penitentiary. This is the destination for folks who are doing time, who've been sent down for what they did. And there's a warden in this penitentiary who uses Buddhism to help rehabilitate prisoners, to get to their hearts, to change them inside. And they have a yard in the 6th courtyard, the last courtyard, that has a large image of Erstor Bodhisattva, Dizang Bodhisattva, the same one that the detention center prisoners were chanting. And it's a very large image made of stone, very handsome image. And this warden says to the classmates inside, he says, all right, he says, you got half an hour every day of free time. You can pump iron, you can lift weights, you can smoke, you can play basketball, or you can come over to the yard and bow to Erstor Bodhisattva. And I'll be out there bowing. You can join me if you want. And if you do, I'll give you points, he said. And so because he's been doing this for a year, when we arrived at the prison, 70 classmates took refuge with the Triple Jewel, which is formal language, meaning they became Buddhists formally, in a ceremony that takes about an hour and a half to do. And our job in the Paulien Penitentiary was to transmit the refuges and to make disciples out of people who'd been preparing for a year by bowing to the Buddha. And in the Paulien Penitentiary, there's lots of tattoos, there's lots of scars, lots of tough-looking characters, men and women. But this group of 70 came out of the larger prison population and signed up, practiced for a year, vowed to change their bad habits if, when the monks from America came, they could take refuge and become Buddhists. So we did the ceremony there, and there's a moment in the ceremony when you do what's called repentance, repenting and reforming. That is basically to say you just review in your mind the mistakes you made, the harm that you've done to self and to others. And it's a very transforming experience to go through the repentance. And so I'm there asking them questions and saying, okay, I'd like you to now admit the mistakes that you have done and make a promise to change. And you can see that these men and women leapt at the chance. It wasn't maybe that nobody knows, maybe I'll cover it up. It was, yes, let me do it. I want to get rid of what makes me hurt so much. And so they did. And after this repentance part, myself and the other monks who were doing the ceremony, the nuns, all were startled because the look on the faces of these classmates was absolutely beatific. Their faces were shining. This innocence came out. And at that point, to say there was a little difference between people on this side of the table, there was no difference between the people on both sides of the table. The true heart of these men and women in that very difficult situation just shined forth. It was wonderful to see the transformation. And they're truly the thing that creates offenses, that creates crimes, that gets arrested, that gets sent to jail, that gets reformed, is the superficial part. There's something deep inside us that seeks freedom, that yearns to go beyond the limitations of the body and its aging and its illness and its death. There's truly a deathless part inside every human being. And the ceremony called it out of the men and women in the Paulien Penitentiary. It's very wonderful to see. And I reflected that outside the wall, most of us run around busy, going to this and that, taking this chance, making this, buying this ticket, going to this event, going, for a vacation and stuff, assuming that this is how things are, that we're free to make any choice we choose, that there are no strings on me, we say. But inside that prison, the reality of what keeps us in the cage was so clear to these people that the taking refuge with the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha opened a window in their lives, and they sucked in the air, the fresh air of liberation through that window. You could see it. Their bodies had to stay, but they were on Nirvana Mountain breathing that clear, fresh air. And it really pointed out how much I don't appreciate the freedom that I have outside the wall. For me, it doesn't matter. I want to go east, north, west, south. I can do that inside the prison. That was so precious. And yet, knowing that their bodies are going to be there opened up a liberation for the spirit that I think most folks outside probably couldn't get close to. It's just, we don't appreciate. We're not grateful. So that was quite an experience. We went from the Paulien Penitentiary to the women's penitentiary across the yard. And while we were there, one of the nuns in our group, in kind of a joking way, said, well, hey, why don't we just name this place Lotus Vihara? A vihara, that's a Sanskrit word for a place of refuge, a place of practice. A vihara is like a retreat, like a temple. So why don't we call this place Lotus Vihara? And everybody applauded. Oh, it's a great idea. Let's do that. Yeah. So we ha. And then 5 days later, we got an email from the warden. He said all the women prisoners, classmates, voted unanimously to officially change the name to Lotus Vihara, the women's penitentiary in Paulien. And the bottom of the email said, the men's penitentiary, where we did the refuges, having heard what the women did, changed the name of the men's penitentiary to, in Chinese, is 觉非经舍, aware of past mistakes, Vihara, waking up to mistakes in the past, Vihara. So we heard that news, and that was really happy. That was one of those moments. We thought, wow, things are changing. That's good. So the question is, what keeps us locked in to our prisons? Well, one thing for sure is habits. One thing that keeps us locked in is addictions. And addictions are things that we give power to, not things that take our freedom away. It's things that we surrender our choices to the point where we have no choice. Something impels us to do things. And the most obvious one would be drugs, but most of us are not, we don't we don't use illegal substances. Many of us are addicted to legal drugs in the world, in America in particular. But there are other things that are more pernicious that don't have the hook or the barb or the stigma of drugs. For example, TV is one of those things that often, just to kill time, we'll sit down in front of the tube. And anything wrong with that? Well, it depends on what you watch, I guess. But what it does do is it takes up our precious time. We trade our precious lifetime for what we call entertainment, when in fact it's often just using the eyes and the ears in a way to keep them stimulated. And we're not even aware that that stimulation is sucking up all our time and our energy. Now, one thing, so are we, if we're still in charge, if we can stand up, pick up the remote, click it off, no problem. We use our wisdom to determine what is harmful, what is wholesome, what's going to help us understand ourselves and our world, what's going to make us less selfish, less greedy. If we can punch the remote when we see it's going the other way, making us greedier, more selfish, more confused, then if we can make that choice, then we're still in charge. But the question is, do we know the difference? And can we make that decision to stand up? Something that I have, as many Americans have done, is I've made meditation part of my lifestyle. Monks meditate, obviously, not just in Buddhism, but in many religious traditions. And meditation, I've found, is a marvelous entertainment that if we make it analogous to TV, or movies, there's actually a parallel. That is to say, when you meditate and you get to a point where you know what's on your mind, people ask me, why do you meditate? And I give a long and a short answer. The long answer is to become a Buddha, to gain freedom from birth, old age, sickness, and death, to rebirth, old age, sickness, and death, to actually get in charge of what's going on. The Buddha did that. That is one accomplishment. Of the many accomplishments of the Buddha was he took charge of mortality. But in the short, when people ask me, I say the reason to meditate is to know what's on my mind. That's very, very helpful to know what's on your mind. For example, if I can catch myself in the act of getting angry before I get angry, it's very helpful to be able to not get angry. If you recall what happened the last time you really flew into a rage, how long it took to patch things up, you remember how useful it would be to be able to say, not this time. I did it last time. I'm going to be patient instead. I'm not going to suppress my anger. I'm going to take that energy and use it differently. Not use it to flame out, to harm, to say words that hurt. Instead, I'm going to say, this time, that anger, that energy is going to turn to light, not to smoke. Okay? If I can say, I'm really angry. I'm angry because I wanted something that I didn't get. Maybe I felt that was mine. Well, is it truly going to make me happy if I get it? How many times do we get something only to discover that it wasn't what we wanted? So we're further behind than before we went out pursuing desire. If we can catch that and trace back the motive, then not only have we saved the destructive power of anger, which is like a bomb, in my family, in my relationships, in my workplace. But I've also been able to catch the insight that unsatisfied desire leads to anger and rage. And that rage can often lead to stupidity, to behavior I really regret later. So to be able to catch the anger and then trace it back and say, right, what I wanted her to do was praise me. Well, she praised him instead, and I don't think he's worthy, and I got angry. Isn't that a lot of hard work? Isn't that a lot of wasted energy? Maybe that's their relationship. It had nothing to do with me. Why don't I just be patient and let that go? Or maybe even be happy for the person who's getting the praise. What a lot of trouble I've saved. If we can trace it back to that movement preceding anger, we've got a method, we've got a handle to turn it. So that energy then comes back. We saved the destruction of the anger. We traced the mental habit, which is very, very valuable, and we know what's on our mind. And we can choose to follow it or not. Meditation allows us to do this. Before I learned to meditate, thought moves, follow it. Moves, react, right? Instinct jumps, and I go for it. That's called unenlightened, unawake, ignorant, in many cases often destructive. So meditation allows us to be clear on what's going on inside. When those thoughts move, we catch it. We go, I don't think so. Let it go. Just be patient. Who cares whether I wanted that or not? In the end, I'd rather meditate. As we do that, we recognize bit by bit that our minds operate very much like a TV show, very much like a play, like a movie. The director is me, myself. The actors are me, myself. The playwright is me, myself, or the story editor, me, myself. And the tech crew, me too, is just me. I'm in there watching my own movie. And that's very helpful to have that perspective. The one reason is it's ongoing. I am running my own movie 24 hours a day. I'm constantly in the theater watching the movie of my own life roll by. And that's another way to talk about karma. That is to say, the things that I do in my day and at night, the things that I do over a year, over 10 years, over a lifetime, who writes that script? Who decides who does that? Well, from the Buddhist point of view, it's me, myself. I'm the one who, with my body, my mouth, and my mind, the three vehicles of karma, plant seeds through action, through thoughts and words that then come ripe and appear as my life. In fact, who is out there running my life for me? Who is out there writing the happiness that I get and the sadness that I get? Nobody else. It's me. And in meditation, we get a clue. We can see it as it unfolds if our minds are quiet. If our minds are still busy and fuzzy and confused with anger and desire and jealousy and hate and love, and as soon as a thought moves, we act on it without reflection, then we're still in the movie, but we're not in control. We're not observing. We're just acting. It's like it can be a tragedy and it can be a comedy in the next minute, and we don't see it. We don't understand the process. If we learn to meditate, if we reflect, now that can be prayer as well. It doesn't have to be Buddhist meditation with your legs crossed. Any way of reflecting on the mind gets the same result. The Buddhist way of doing it is a way to get real stillness. But I know non-Buddhists who don't actually do this kind of meditation, but are very clear about their motives and watch their mind very clearly. So I practice Buddhist meditation, but there are many, many ways to meditate. Now, what I do is sit still on a regular basis, every day, same time. I wash my face and hands, and morning is a really nice time before the cars are out on the freeway and before the dust is flowing through the air. But rinse my mouth and wash my face and hands, and then do a little bit of exercise, sometimes drink a cup of tea just to stretch the body, get the circulation going, and then sit down and be quiet. And I cross my legs to sit. Sitting in a chair is perfectly good if your body doesn't bend that way. Buddha images, like the one behind me, you'll see is sitting in full lotus. That's a traditional Buddhist posture, but that's one of many. And then I use the breath counting technique. I watch my breath, fill my lungs, and then exhale slowly, and I just be aware, just watch. And then that gets me started, and then I am aware of my thoughts. Now, there are many, many ways to meditate, but this is a good general way to meditate. And as I'm sitting there, I can catch the movement of my thoughts. Not that I'm hoping I'm going to watch my thoughts, but as they rise, I notice they move. Be aware, just watch. Get in touch with my thoughts. And when I do that every day, what I discover is that I have more energy during the day. It's very interesting how just the practice of regular sitting, I sit for an hour in the morning and an hour at night as a monk, but I imagine most of us don't have that much time, especially if we have a busy life. So 15 minutes every day, regularly at the same time, makes a big difference in our lives. Half an hour is even better. Or you can do it at the workplace at the noon break. Eat a bite less or a sandwich less and come back and meditate. You get the same benefits. What I discover is I have much more energy during the day to use on the things that I really care about. And further, I find that it helps my concentration. So, for example, if I'm an athlete, I'm involved in team sports, I find that when I meditate, I have more awareness of where the play is going, of the things that develop. You know, maybe we have a teamwork. I can see my teammates going down, the pass is right on the spot. If it's a volleyball or even individual sports such as tennis or cycling, I find that I bring more to it. I have more energy and more awareness to bring to it. If I'm not an athlete, but I work at a computer every day, I notice that I'm really more aware of what my eyes are doing, and I spend less time aimlessly surfing the web, more time focusing on what I can use the computer for to give, to benefit. My work gets done more quickly, more efficiently, because I can concentrate. If I'm working with kids, when I meditate, I discover that I get angry less. My button is not there to be pushed as easily. Why? Because I've been watching my thoughts. The kid comes and, you know, maybe it's my son or my daughter, or maybe I'm working in a school, it's somebody else's son or daughter. And they try to get me. They say just the thing that in the past would set me off. And because I see the kid is testing their power, testing their control, I can withdraw that button and just say, okay, that's fine. Now, you're going to do what I say, because why? I'm in charge and it's much more fun this way. Let's go get a cookie. You don't react the way you did before. Why? Because you've been reflecting on your mind's patterns and on your habits, and you're in charge. Many, many benefits from meditation. So I find that if I do this over time, I realize that I'm really filming my own movie, the movie of my life. And that way, you can use wisdom. You can choose. You're not pushed around by the winds of karma. In fact, you can say, no, I would rather plant this seed with this word. I'd rather plant this seed with this thought. I'd rather create this benefit for other people. I'd rather help other people with this action than what I did before. So we become the real directors and scriptwriters of the movie of our lives simply through watching, paying attention, and noticing. No batteries needed. You don't have to plug in anywhere. It's you, it's just me and my own mind, and taking the time to notice. These methods are ancient methods. This is not Buddhist circle R wisdom. This is heritage wisdom that every tradition teaches. But so few of us hear encouragement to go ahead and do it in our lives. Or we might want to do it but don't have a method. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to drive to the shopping mall, to the yoga center, although if you have one, that's great. But just make it simple, make it real. Sit down, watch your mind, count your breath, get your body relaxed, and then meditate. You don't even have to call it meditation. Call it self-therapy, call it depth psychology, or my time alone with myself, whatever you want to do. If you have a good prayer life and you can talk to the deity of your choice, or if you have a relationship with Jesus that's based on a new awareness of his action in your life, take that time with Jesus. Jesus was a meditator. There are many descriptions of Jesus walking alone and being still and silent, probably meditating in whatever tradition. Judaism has davening. Judaism has a practice called devakut, which is this practice of stillness and concentration, very uniquely Jewish meditation. Catholics have an ancient tradition of meditation. So every religious tradition teaches us to be still with our mind. And how we use it is up to us. There's many, many techniques, but the important thing is that we take that time regularly every day to review what's going on. The Buddha did this to the point of liberation. He was able to untie the knots, untie the afflictions in his mind, and become one with the Dharma, with these traditional, wonderful methods. So this is really the heart of the Dharma. There was no Buddhism when the Buddha went off into the woods to discover what was going on with his life. He was simply determined to seek freedom. He really wanted ultimate freedom. So I think in America, Buddhism is going to catch on simply because it's democratic. There's no priest class in between the Buddha and the practitioner. That's an important point to notice. As a monk, I wear this robe because I've taken vows, I take precepts that guide me, that actually bring my energy to a focus as I practice these ancient methods, walking the same path the Buddha walked. But I'm not in between a layperson and the ultimate source of truth. We're absolutely horizontal as we practice. I do it full time, and that's why I became a monk, so I wouldn't have to put energy elsewhere in raising kids or family or keeping a job going. So my needs are simple, but what I do with my mind and with my body is identical with what any layperson can do with their mind and with their body, men and women alike. It's been that way for 2,500 years, so that's a very attractive part of the Dharma. Likewise, Buddhism is very scientific. It's very science-friendly. That is to say, the Buddha encouraged his followers or students to investigate, not to take it on faith, not to take it from somebody else, but to try it out yourself. If it works for you, walk that way. If this path is leading you towards insight, towards wisdom, towards compassion, then this is a good path to walk. But only walk it as long as it leads you towards that direction. If you find yourself going in the wrong direction, turn back, find another road. The Buddha himself made many mistakes during his 6 years of practice in the mountains, and he kept trying, kept adjusting. Too much and too little, he adjusted till he found the perfect middle way. So I would like to encourage anybody who's interested in finding out the true meaning of freedom to find a path that works and walk that way. They say there are 84,000 paths. There's certainly one that works for each one of us. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone well and to try. His Holiness the Dalai Lama had a really great answer to a reporter who wanted a soundbite. The reporter stuck a microphone in Dalai Lama's face and said, "Sir," he said, "would you define Buddhism in, you got 30 seconds. And he stuck the microphone in his face. Dalai Lama was really ready. He said, "Basic human kindness. That is my religion." And the reporter went, "That's pretty good. I like that." So basic human kindness, try it in your family. My teacher, Master Shrenhua, said most important thing he's ever practiced is don't fight. Yield instead. Don't be greedy. Give instead. Be generous. Don't seek. Instead, be content with what comes. Don't be selfish. Understand that I am not the center of the world. Be public-spirited instead. Don't seek personal advantage. Give the benefits. Share the goodness. Be grateful for what comes. And finally, tell the truth. Avoid falsehood. Those 6 things, said Master Hua, are the real key to everything he's practiced in his 50 years of life as a Buddhist monk. So instead of fighting, instead of greedy, instead of seeking selfishness, self-benefit, and dishonesty, he said, yield instead. Be generous. Be content. Be unselfish. Benefit others and tell the truth. And our feet are on the Buddhist path. So I would like to wish that to everyone, and may your families be peaceful and happy.